You know, I've been having a hard time trying to figure out a good intro for this one, especially since at this point, I'm sure you guys are all sick of the 1111 kind of videos, and you're probably not thrilled to see another. But I figured it'd be best, and you guys would all appreciate it, if I just kept this one simple and straight to the point. So, this is the Watch Dives WD-007, which is not exactly a subtle reference, as this is their No Time to Design homage watch. And the bottom line here, what you really need to know about it, is that it is a watch of compromises. So if you're looking for the perfect entry-level diver, this isn't going to be it. But considering this is a grade 2 titanium diver with a scratch-resistant coating for well under 200 bucks, which that is really the big thing about it, well, compromise is something you'd kind of expect with it. But let's get to it and you'll kind of see what I mean here. So just like the Seamaster this is inspired by, this is a 42mm wide diver, with a slightly longer 49mm lug to lug. Although this particular version is a bit thick at 14mm, which includes the closed case back and a domed sapphire crystal. And I'm guessing the bit of that thickness here is thanks to the Seiko NH35A powering the whole thing. And since this is titanium, the entire thing is a bit lightweight, with the watch head itself being only 54 grams. And then when you throw on the steel bracelets, again, steel bracelets, it's more like 110 grams, which for a 42mm diver is pretty lightweight. If they had included a titanium bracelet instead of steel, it could have been even lighter. But considering the price point, it's not really realistic. And just in case you didn't notice it earlier, the promotional tag is up. So Watch Dive sent in this watch and they're not asking for it back. Now let's talk about what this is. The WD-007 pretty much follows the Omega's inspiration in terms of its design. So we're talking classic Seamaster style case with twisted lugs, as well as slightly shallow crown guards and the helium escape valve thingy over at the upper right, which they say works, but if I'm being honest, I'm never going to be in a situation to actually test it. And honestly, almost none of you will either. And just like the case, the dial also follows its inspiration, with its matte black base, classic Omega indices, hands, and as well as the faded looking luminous paint. Although Watch Dives also has two more different colorways that kind of break the mold, where you have a white dial and a blue dial version, complete with the regular Seamaster wavy pattern etched into it. And personally, I think those are the more interesting options. And I should also point out here that this also includes Watch Dives' new logo. They've had a version of this in the past, but this is the one with the new logo, which is this shield and trident combo thing, and I think a step up from the old one. Now, at this point, and I want to give you guys some fair warning here, but at this point, you're going to hear me say the word but a lot, because we're going to start talking about those compromises. And we might as well start off with the case. Again, this is a grade 2 titanium case with a scratch-resistant coating, something pretty cool for the price. And from the top, the finishing looks really good and really smooth to the touch. But the thing is, once your fingers start wandering a bit south, it is a lot more sharper and rough at times. This isn't typically something you're going to feel when you wear it, just kind of when you're picking it up and putting it on. Then there's the bezel. It's a thin Seamaster style with scalloped edges. The white and blue versions actually come with a ceramic insert, which is really nice for the price for the added scratch resistance. But this particular black version comes with this bronze chocolatey brown aluminum insert. I know at times it looks black, but whenever any bright light hits it, it kind of turns into that chocolatey bronze. The other thing is that the bezel itself can be pretty hard to get a hold of. It's pretty thin and you need to get your fingers kind of at the top and the bottom of it, and it's really hard with gloves on. And once you do get a grip on it, the action itself isn't really great and kind of unpredictable. Generally, they say titanium bezels do feel a little bit weaker or different, but this is even more beyond that. Then let's kind of go back to the dial here, and I think for the most part, the dial looks pretty good. There's nice applied indices and a little bit of depth with that. And this one is the dateless version, so everything looks really nice and clean and symmetrical. And one thing I have to give the watch a lot of credit for is that there is a high degree of contrast here. I mean, it's a black and orange color scheme, so you can kind of expect it. But this is something I noticed when I was out walking my dog right around dusk. And even though it was getting darker and darker, I still found it pretty easy to read the watch. But, and maybe this is another nitpick here, but one thing that's always bugged me is when the colors don't quite match up. And here, the yellow paint on the chapter ring and the bezel don't quite match that of the old radium style lume on the indices. One's a little bit more yellow and the other's a little bit more orange. It's not horrible, but it's always something just kind of bugs me when I notice it. And along the same lines, the metal, the titanium on the crowns, looks a little bit darker than the case itself. And I think that's more due to the finishing, but again, it doesn't quite match up. And before we move on, let's go back and talk about the old radium style lume. The lume here is sort of okay, kinda. I mean, if it was a regular watch, it'd be okay, but it's not really great for a diver, as it's able to barely keep up with my old Vostok. But considering it's old radium, yeah, I kind of expected that. That's why I keep calling it old fadium. Then let's move on to the domed crystal here, which I think looks great with any kind of design like this. But, I've noticed a bit of reflection and glare at times with it as well. It's not horrible, I've seen worse, but it is something you'll notice. And of course, we can't forget the bracelet here. Now, the bracelet is a pretty well made steel mesh style bracelet with a really well made milled clasp. Seriously, this clasp is actually pretty impressive for the price. And on the wrist, the watch is actually pretty comfortable, even with the longer lug to lug. I think that's partially because the mesh bracelet comes straight down and ignores a little bit of that. So it's nice and easy to wear throughout the day, and even though it does have a 42mm case, since it's titanium, it's still pretty lightweight and not top heavy at all. But, there are a couple of issues here. The first of which is that it's just kind of wiggly and sloppy when connected to the watch. And I think it's because the spring bar they're using is a lot thinner than the hole in the bracelet itself. And the whole thing just kind of leads to this really sloppy experience. Although personally, I think this thing actually looks better on a strap anyways. But if you do order the bracelet, kind of know that going in. And then this is kind of an odd one. If you happen to have the same wrist size as I do, which is 7.25 inches, and you just happen to be using the middle hole, the fourth hole here, it sometimes doesn't want to open up. And hopefully you guys can see this, because when you're on the fourth hole, the inner part of the bracelet ends just right at the end of the clasp and kind of sits flush against it. So that when you open it, the very edge of that clasp kind of hits the bracelet and doesn't want to open. And this is really annoying when you're actually wearing it. And the only thing you can do is kind of back it up, make sure that's up a little bit, and then you're fine. And it's kind of odd to say this, but if you're on any other hole than the fourth one, it's actually a super nice clasp. It's just if you're on that fourth hole, you get the occasional, like, what the hell's going on moments. So once again, this is a watch of compromises. And kind of the odd thing with this one is that there are a lot of good points to it, but for every good point, there's an equal bad point. Which, in some ways you can kind of expect at this point. I mean, you can't really expect perfection for less than $200. But, and that's the last time I'm going to say that, the problem here is that over the last few years, the competition in the Chinese AliExpress budget watch world has become fierce. And there are a lot of other really solid watches out there at this price. Now, those won't be titanium, and they may not even offer ceramic bezel. Yet, I think there are going to be some watches that offer a better overall experience, since they don't have to balance out the titanium with everything else they want to do. So, my take on this is that if you happen to be obsessed with the No Time to Die watch, or you just really want a decent titanium watch at a decent price, then at that point, this is one to keep in mind. Yet for everyone else, I think it's a pass. That you should either save up a little bit more or look for maybe one of those diamonds in the rough at this price point. Watches that just don't seem reasonable, but seem like they're really punching above their price point. There are a few out there, and you just have to look. But let me know your thoughts on that down below, as well as what do you think about the watch in general, as well as what would you recommend somebody buy at this price point if they're actually looking for a watch. And as always, you guys know what to do down below. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and I'll see you next time.